lebitso ke Ratjomose Machema, ye mongwe wa di-consultants or one of the consultants under the Jakupa Tournament CJV, basically employed or focusing on 3 specialist reports under the NSDF. The first report is the zooming or zoning report, whereby we try to understand Lesotho's vision or Lesotho's economic growth over the medium term. The medium term, we can define it here over a 10-year period or over a shorter 5-year period. So basically we are trying to say, okay, how will Lesotho look like over this medium term, and how can that forecasting or visioning that we do impact the spatial plans that we are going to make. So that's the first specialist report that we are dealing with. The second specialist report is basically on the national and local economic development. So basically what we are trying to do is to understand and characterize the national economic development, and then understand and characterize similarly the local economic development. So the national here means the country as a whole, Lesotho, so the economic development of Lesotho. And the local here, we defined local at the more basic level, district level. So we are trying to understand economic development at the district level. So that's the second specialist report. And the third specialist report we are working on is on the demographic and settlement patterns in the country. So the idea there, or the objective, is still to analyze and characterize the settlement, different types of settlement patterns in the country, as well as the demographic transition or demographic transformations that are happening within the country, as well as their impacts on the NSDF. So those are the 3 specialist reports that we are doing. So let me go in detail into each one of the reports and explain the approach we have taken and maybe the possible findings, because we now have some findings from these reports. So starting with the first report, which I said is the more of a zoning or visioning report, whereby we are forecasting Lesotho's economy over a medium term, over a longer term. So here we used 2 approaches, since it's a sort of a scenario building. So we borrowed from the literature of scenario building. We undertook first a horizon scanning exercise. So we asked, what are some of the key shifters or key change makers globally, regionally, and domestically that we can be able to integrate. So after doing this horizon scanning at the national level, the next scenario would be the next step will be to build scenarios. So in building scenarios, we went a little bit more quantitative rather than qualitative, whereby we were using the information from the horizon scanning to inform GDP forecasting. So we did a GDP forecast at 2 levels. The first one was a generic one, whereby we just used an ARIMA model, which is just the time series modeling, to forecast the GDP. And the second element was the vector autoregressive modeling, a Bayesian one for that matter, whereby we were informed in terms of the variables to choose by the horizon scanning. So we did that forecasting of GDP to try and indicate where will Lesotho be in the next 5 years or 10 years. So these scenarios or this forecast will be the one we are going to use to try and advise as to how the country will look like in the next 5 years, as well as in the next 10 years. So they will be essential, especially for the National Spatial Development Plan, because the plan as it is, it's meant to spatialize the already existing development plans. So you would find that when we were doing the forecasting, we relied a lot more on the sectors under NSDP to guide us as to which key sectors would be able to influence the economy going forward. So that's basically what we did. So that is the element of it. And the results we found are basically similar to what everybody has been doing, in that the Lesotho's economy, the periodic forecast or the periodic growth was around 1 to 2%. And then when we forecasted under the stable scenario using the ARIMA model, it was still giving us the growth in around between 1 and 2%. But when we went to the more optimistic scenario, assuming that the Spatial Development Plan gets implemented in the way that we want, there are no other implementations gaps that we can think about, then growth jumps to about 5%, which is a very optimistic one. But as we noted, that is the utopian one, if we can put it that way, the utopian plan. And then I think with the situation or the scenario whereby we're saying what happens if none of the spatial plans gets implemented, what happens if we face some of the worst possible choices or implementation gaps, then we noted that the growth falls below 0.5% or it's around 0.1%. So it's basically a general stagnation in the economy. So that is the findings that we're able to find. So in terms of the first approach, under this one, we said we are going to do horizon scanning. So the horizon scanning here was basically, or the results are much more similar to the horizon scanning that was done in 2017 under the Lesotho Foresight project. So the only emerging issue that we can talk about that was a highlighted key was the youth unemployment. It was still highlighted in 2017, but it wasn't the main one. But right now, I think with the advent of COVID, the issue of youth unemployment was highly emphasized. That is one of the issues that will shift the country going forward. Secondly, another issue was that of businesses, that a number of businesses in the country appear not to be in the hands of Basotho. So that is one of the dynamic or one of the trends that was emerging, that if we do not look for it in the future, it may cause some significant shifts. So that's how we were able to find, or that's how we were able to come up with findings under that section. So moving on to the second report. So we said the second report is the national and local economic development. So under this report, we still relied on two approaches. The first approach is at the national level. So here we relied on the standard using the Human Development Index. So the Human Development Index, we know, is composed of three indicators: the economic indicator, which is GDP, the health indicator, which is life expectancy, and the education indicator, which is the average years of schooling. So we're able to present here the patterns and trends of these three variables, as well as the combined together to indicate the national economic development of the country. And from this assessment, we noted that the country has been developing in general. When we talk developing, we mean the composite indicator. The overall development has been increasing, even though at a slow pace. But when you look individually at the indicators, you'll see that the economic indicator, which is GDP, it has been increasing, but after 2010, it sort of stagnated. And then from 2015, it declined, and declining further during COVID. There was a recovery in 2021, even though marginal. But in general, you will see that we have those kind of three phases, whereby starting in the early 90s, there was a general increase in GDP or economic indicator. But then from 2010, there was a general decline or stagnation. And then in 2015, there was a notable decline in the overall economic indicator. And when you look at the health indicator, which is life expectancy, it shows two patterns as well, or two trends, whereby it was very low in the 80s and 90s. And then starting late 90s, it started to increase. So it has been on an average increase since the late 90s. Generally, I think is the coincides with the impact, or the, what do you call it, the import, the ARVs, the country being able to access ARVs, because in the earlier years, the death rates due to HIV were higher. So that is the pattern we're able to note. And then the story with regards to education or education indicator, what we noted is that the average years of schooling, either among children or adults, they have been generally increasing from the early 90s up until the 90s and the early 2000s. But starting from 2010, we have seen stagnation in the average years of schooling, either because the adult population is generally literate, or either because now the benefits or the returns to education are no longer as visible as they were in the early 80s and in the early 90s. And this can coincide with some of the concerns that were noted earlier of the high unemployment. So in an economy whereby high unemployment is there, especially among graduates, so the observable thing is that education has no benefit. So people are reluctant to invest in education, or they are reluctant to further their education. So that can explain some of those patterns. So that's what we're able to find out. And the second approach that we used, basically coinciding with the local economic development, was the SWOT analysis. So under the SWOT analysis, we went across the 10 districts of the country, whereby we were trying to understand the strengths of the district, the opportunities that the district has, the weaknesses of the district, as well as the threats that the district has. So emphasis was mostly on the strengths, trying to understand what is it that the district has as an economic advantage over any other districts, and what opportunities can it have over any other district, or even relative to the national economy, that can be leveraged on during the spatial development plans. So we are able to use that approach and come up with what we called the district plans, or district SWOT analysis, that we can be able to consolidate and come up with opportunities as well as assets for each of the districts. And then to complement this, we used results from the territorial development by the World Bank. So the World Bank in 2022 and 2023 undertook an assessment, what they called a territorial development. So from that territorial development, they used a common indicator of night lights data to try and estimate economic activity across key ecological zones, coincided with or meshed together with the rural areas. And they were able to indicate that the urban corridor, or the lowlands areas, have a large economic activity there, which is what we also find out, that among the lowlands districts, there is a lot of economic activity, or a lot of assets that can be leveraged on during the spatial development plans. So this is what we found with the second report. And then with the third report on the settlement patterns as well as demographic shifts, we first tried to understand the settlement patterns in the country, and we were able to come up with 3 settlement patterns, being urban, rural, as well as peri-urban. So in terms of divination, or how this settlement come about, I think it's much more easier to define. Even the literature defines urban areas, and then whatever is not defined as urban gets classified as rural. And then in Lesotho, we noted that BOES has started adding another settlement that is called peri-urban. So the common definition for urban, or the common characteristics of an urban area, would be a presence of economic activity, or it will be what is commonly known as an urban council or urban centers. So we would have about 11 or 12 of those urban centers in the country. So that is what is defined as urban. So even the characteristics there. So the formation of urban councils or urban centers, they were initially camps, or they were initially towns that were occupied by either the British or by either any of the settlers that came in Lesotho. So you would find many of them next to the rivers or next to the borders. So that's how that settlement patterns comes about. So the characteristics of it is that it's experiencing high urbanization rates, it's experiencing high built activity or built space, meaning there are many structures that are constructed there, and they have a lot of economic activity there in terms of schools, in terms of clinics, in terms of businesses and industries. So you can find those among the urban centers or urban councils. So the second one we said is the rural area. So the rural area, these are traditional Basotho areas whereby they were residing. So they were established initially from the local chiefs, whereby the principal chief will allocate his sons these areas. So that's how they came about. But you will see that they become sparsely distributed as the population increases. Then there is a demand for land and there is a demand for housing. So you would find that the rural areas increase from that pattern. So the characteristics of them, they have remained largely similar across time, and we don't expect to see any much differences going forward. But the build activity within them, we have seen that there is a change in structure, or the type of houses that are being built in the rural areas are now different, or there is more, different types of materials being used to build there. So the build activity seems to be increasing at the same pace as that one in the urban areas. And then the other area, or the other settlement pattern, is basically peri-urban area. So peri-urban area is what lies between rural and urban. It's basically some of those former rural areas that have seen a lot of activity in terms of businesses being opened, in terms of build activity, in terms of population density being there. So you would find them adjacent usually or closer to some of the larger urban centers. So they tend to accommodate a lot of people as well. They tend to accommodate a lot of businesses. So that is what we call a build activity or peri-urban areas, and they tend to have a lot of build activity as well, relatively more than the urban, even the rural areas. So those are the settlement patterns that we were able to come up, we were able to note. And in terms of the spatial plans and the impact for spatial planning, we noted that there is what they call the urban sprawl within the literature of urban planners, is that the urban council seems to be sprawling out or seems to be moving out. So there needs to be a need to densify the urban areas to control them going out of the planned areas or the planned designations. And in terms of rural areas, there is also that sprawl that is happening as the population increases, demand for land increases as well as demand for housing. So they tend to encroach or they tend to shift or move to more agricultural land. Therefore, there needs to be that management of the land or how that sprawl or that increase in demand can be managed. So those are the elements that we noted or the implications for the spatial development plan. And then on the last component of this chapter is the demographic shifts. So I think on the demographic shifts, some of the notable shifts that we can highlight here was basically the population distribution. So in terms of the population pyramid, the common one we noted is the youth bulge, that the pyramid is becoming bigger in the middle. So meaning that the people aged between 18 and 45 or even 35 is the largest in the country. So that's the youth bulge. And even at the top of the pyramid, whereby we can look at the people 60 and above, we noted that there is a little bit of ageism. That is, people are living longer, especially women are living longer. So when you look at it, people that are over 80 years, mostly, many of them are widows, females, that are living longer there. And then at the bottom of the pyramid, what we noted is that the birth rate has been sort of constant over the years, and we don't see any significant shift in it. But what we measured was that the fertility has been declining, I think from the 70s, from about 4.5 to currently about 2.3. So that is one element that we can think about, that fertility among women seems to be declining. So it may affect birth rates going forward, but it's not a significant change, but it's likely to have an impact. So the other demographic shifts that we can talk about, I think, in terms of districts, we did look about it. We start, Maseru is one of the populous districts in the country, followed by Leribe, as well as Mafeteng and others. So that's the population distribution across areas that we're able to see. And then, yeah, I think those are the key variables that I can highlight with that chapter. Beyond this one, I think, thank you.